enough chit chat. We'll get into the topic for the week. The topic for the week is appropriate stocking. So I guess like the first thing to sort of like get out of the way is like what is stocking rate, and then what is stocking density, because those two terms get thrown around in the livestock management world a lot. So we can sort of clear the air with that first, and then we'll sort of go into a little bit more detail, I guess.
Yeah, so stocking rate is the rate of animals to acres that you have on your farm. So for example, let's say there's 700 acres that you're running on, and you have 350 head of cows. You're stocked at, what would it be, 2 acres per animal or per cow, which per
roughly
head.
Yeah.
Let's say you had,
well, let's make it easy. Let's make it easy. Yeah.
500 acres, and you had 100 animal units, so 1,000-pound animal equivalents, whether that's cows, bulls, calves, whatever.
We can get into that in a second, but yeah.
And so you're stocked at 5 acres per 1 animal unit. That's your stocking rate. Stocking density, on the other hand, let's say you're doing twice a day moves, or let's just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Single day moves. You've put your 100 head on 4 acres. And the 100 head or 100 animal units, which is 100,000
pounds. Yeah.
100,000 pounds on 4 acres. So divided the 100,000 pounds by 4 acres, you're stocked at 25,000 pounds per acre. That's the stocking density.
Yep.
Where just don't get the stocking rate and density confused, and it's easy to confuse if it's
they're
so similar.
Absolutely. And you just talked about it, but I'll clarify even further for people who don't understand. Animal units is a way of like standardizing, because everybody knows like a big 1,500-pound cow is different from a 600-pound steer, is different from a 100-pound sheep, is different from 125-pound goat, is different from like on and on and on. Like they're like
2,000-pound water buffalo.
Yeah, so like how do you equate all these different livestock when you're talking about stocking rate or stocking density on your farm? And one of the ways to do it that I think it makes pretty intuitive sense is to just treat everything in animal units, which is based on one animal unit is one 1,000-pound cow, like
live weight.
Live weight.
1,000 pounds of live animal weight is one animal unit.
So like one 1,000-pound cow would be one animal unit. One 1,500-pound cow would be a 1.5 animal unit.
2 500-pound steers would be one animal unit.
And it takes roughly, there's some debate as far as the sheep are concerned because of lambs and like that kind of thing, but roughly 5 ewes per animal unit. So for every one animal unit, you can run one 1,000-pound cow or 5 sheep. Roughly. But anyway, so animal units, stocking rate is your entire farm, like over the course of the year.
The stocking rate doesn't really change,
no.
Like day to day. Like it's like if you're doing it right, it should be a continual progression with what your like carrying capacity is on your land. If your land is improving due to your management, your stocking rate should be able to be increasing over years. Whereas like the stocking density
varies dramatically.
Each paddock move, you could have different density, and like the density and time is like there's a real like delicate balance between the two. Where like you can have super high density, like 1,000,000 pounds to the acre, which you're tightening your herd down that much, but you only want to leave them there for 30 minutes. Whereas, say you're leaving them there for a day, maybe you want to be more at like 20,000 pounds an acre or 40,000 pounds per acre of density. So there's like pretty much the tighter you put them, the quicker you want to be moving them.
Otherwise, they overgraze. Because that's really the big thing is like, we want to avoid overgrazing, right, as grass-based managers. And so there's a couple different ways that you end up overgrazing, right? The stocking rate is the first thing you should look at as far as like if you're going to be potentially overgrazing your operation. And the stocking rate you can get, like the NRCS will put out a average stocking rate for your county or your area. And that's always a good rule of thumb. Like when you're starting out and you're not entirely sure as far as like what is normal like in your area, you can always go off of that number because it's quite conservative. If you're rotationally grazing it by any means, your stocking rate's probably going to be higher than the county average, but it'll be a really safe place to start if you start around that. Whatever, I think
because they base it off of everything in the county. Everybody that's running cattle, what are they stocked at? That's the average rate they're figuring. And a lot of people in your county were probably continuously grazing, so they can't be stocked as heavy because they're not moving them. Whereas when like you said, when you're moving them, you're hopefully able to increasing the recovery, and increasing the amount of forage you're growing. Therefore, you have a better stocking rate, or you can have more animals on your land.
So starting out, like taking that stocking rate for your county that you get from the your NRCS or whatever organization, and starting around there, and then evaluating, wow, I have way too much grass that's getting away from me, or I have too many animals, which probably won't happen if you're going that conservative in the beginning. But stocking rate's the first thing to look at. If you have too many animals just on your farm in general, it doesn't matter how tight or how small or less dense or more dense you're going to be able to make that, your rotations or whatever, you're just going to run out of grass.
So if your stocking rate is incorrect, you're never going to get your stocking density is never going to fix that problem.
Nope.
You have to look at the stocking rate first, like you were saying.
That's the first thing to look at. And then your stocking density is, like, once you know that your stocking rate is appropriate, when you're looking at your stocking density, that's like your everyday moves or every 2-day moves or whatever you're doing, evaluating the forage residual after each move, right? And so, and it varies, like, depending on the time of year, depending on the drought, like that drought or no drought. It's one of those things where, like, sometimes you want to, I mean, as a general rule of thumb, we like to leave a good amount of residual, like, just grazing the top third of the plant, for the most part. But there's sometimes that we'll hammer the grass down,
especially in the wintertime when we're trying to get as much stockpiles as we can.
And so you just adjust your stocking density to get the desired amount of residual in each paddock. And that's something that's very plastic, as in, like, you can manipulate that, like, very readily depending on what you're seeing. And so when people always ask, like Greg or us or whatever, like, how big a paddock should I be giving my animals? There are so many pieces to that question. And the first big piece is, like, where are you located, right? And the second big piece is how many animals do you have? And then, like, what time of year is it? Like, what kind of conditions are you in? Like, that kind of stuff is going to all dictate how big or small
what's your forage look like.
But the simplest answer that you could give somebody when it's like, how big a paddock should I give them? Just try something and see what happens. And then when you move them to the next paddock, look at what was in that paddock. If it's like, wow, that's way too short, give them a bigger area. If it's like, wow, there's a ton of grass left over, give them a smaller area. And you're going to figure it out pretty quickly, like what that sweet spot is for your individual microclimate.
You're going to develop a grazing eye. So you're going to be able to look at a piece of grass. And, like, different times of the year, sometimes we have, 18 inches of grass out there. Sometimes we have, 12 inches of grass or whatever. Like, just depending on the season, depending on the conditions. Every single piece of land is not going to have the same amount of forage at all times in the year. So, like, we're constantly adjusting the size of the paddocks that we're making, and so it's never like there's never a cookie cutter answer with it, is what it really boils down to. It's all context dependent. So
but at the end of the day, like, if you're moving your animals at all, right? Even if you've divided your farm into 4 quadrants and you're just rotating your animals around, you're going to be growing more grass than somebody who's just giving the animals the entire farm at a set stocked situation. So it's like we always, and Greg always harps on, like, making sure that you're really concentrating on animal performance, you're really concentrating on leaving enough residual, and you don't want to graze it too short. You want to be just grazing the tips, and you got to move them fast in the spring and slow in the summer, and there's, like, all these moving pieces, and it gets overwhelming for a lot of people. But the most important thing to remember is, like, the cattle are quite forgiving. Like, you're not going to kill anything by giving them too small or too big of an area
for a day,
even several days, like a long time. You could screw up for a long time, and the cattle performance probably will suffer, but it's not like you're going to kill anything. And so you just need to, like, take a deep breath and be like, okay, let me just try it and see just be observant and watch what's happening, right? And so, like, at the end of the day, if you're just rotating and not paying attention and not adjusting your paddock sizes at all, you're going to be better off than somebody who's set stocked. But if you're adjusting your paddock sizes and manipulating your stocking density, in the paddock with the conditions,
and you're stocked at the right,
and your overall stocking rate is correct, you're going to grow even more grass than somebody who's just rotating in 4 quadrants without, just cookie cutter, not paying attention to any sort of environmental conditions. So there's just layers of complexity to the whole thing. And the more complex and nuanced you can make it, the more you're going to align with the complexity and nuanced nature of the ecosystem that you're operating in. And the more you can level those two things together where your complexity is matching the complexity of what's around you, like that's when you just have it just running like a top. And everything starts to go well. Your animal performance increases, your grass health, healthier soil, healthier water system, healthier greater ecosystem, all that just starts to, go crazy in a good way.
Yeah. So I was thinking about stocking density. So
I'm gonna go turn the oven on.
Yeah. With stocking density, the more density you can get on an area, the better the land's going to respond, the better impact you're going to get, the better growth you're going to get on the recovery side of things. That being said, it's a delicate game. And I think a huge problem in like this, mob grazing or rotational grazing, people get in this mindset, well, if I get these cattle packed in real tight and I make them take it down and, I'm moving them, they're still doing good. You really, I need to stress this. You really need to be focusing on animal performance in that respect. Yes, taking it down, absolutely hammering it, beating it up, nothing left, making the cattle eat everything. As long as you're getting a rain too, that's another factor.
And a long enough recovery period.
And a long enough recovery period. That's going to come back awesome because you had a lot of stocking density. But your cattle, by making them do that, you're really pushing your cattle, and in the long run, that's going to really come back and bite you. So, stocking density is awesome as long as you're moving them quick enough. Like this summer, we had the cocklebur field. There was a big rain, and we had left the cattle in this bottom, and they had mudded it. To a soup, and so
it was like a 4-inch rain.
Yeah,
like it was an abnormal occurrence. Yeah.
And so nothing was growing in that spot. It was just like mud. And so the only thing that grew back was cockleburs. Cockleburs, I don't know if you're not familiar, they're birds that are really prevalent in like crop fields. And since this bottom was located right next to a creek, a lot of seeds from the crop fields came, and they're planted in that bottom. And so these cockleburs came up, and we had, they were, 6 foot tall.
Yeah, some
in
of them
some
were
spots,
like 6 feet tall.
And just gnarly things. They put out a burr that has a bunch of spikes on them.
And
it's like a seed pod, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like animal dispersal seed mechanism.
It sticks to their hair coats and everything. And so what we did is we split it up into, there's like probably an acre section.
Yeah, it was probably
about an acre that we had done this, that got mudded and had the cockleburs. And so we divided that acre into 3. And one morning we sent the whole mob into one of the a third of an acre or whatever, 370 head, 264 animal units, roughly.
Yeah.
And they were in there, and we were just, letting them mill around. They had enough room to just barely walk around the paddock without touching hot wire, but they were seriously trampling some of those cockleburs on the ground. And then we waited until it looked like they had trampled enough and there wasn't anything left to eat in there. It was about 30 minutes, and we moved into the next piece. And we did that for 3 times, and we were at million pounds to the acre stocking density, but we were only there for half an hour.
Someone can do the math. If it's 265 animal units in a third of an acre, you could do the math and figure out what the stocking density was. But anyway.
Yeah, and so in that respect, if you can get that density and move them that quick, you're going to do really good for animal performance, and you're going to do really good on your recovery or your animal impact too. If you were stocked at that density, if we decide, oh, we're just gonna leave them there all day at $1 million to the acre.
A, they probably would get out. In fact,
they would definitely get out.
Most certainly get out.
B, they would have to be eating. They'd eat everything down to the dirt and then start, reaching their necks underneath the water. They do that before they get it down to the dirt. They'd be reaching their necks, and everything that they could reach underneath the fence without getting shocked, they'd have that all chewed off to the ground, and it would just be awful for the cattle, awful for the land. But since we were still stocked at that $1 million per acre, but we were just moving them quick. That's the key, is the time that they're there.
And the goal really wasn't for them to eat the cockleburs.
Yeah.
Because there's almost no feed value in a mature or mostly mature cocklebur. They'll sometimes eat them when they're like really tender, but it's not like something that they seek out. They smell like cat piss. Like they don't smell good at all.
Yeah.
And so anyway, like the point was just to stomp them and break those stems and that sap flow to just kill the cockleburs without us having to go in there and mechanically get rid of all of them. Even though I think Greg went in afterwards and knocked the ones off.
I posted a post about it where I had a before, during, and after picture of the cocklebur. Same spot. It's kind of cool to see the difference that they made.
Yeah.
It was like July or something. So if you want to scroll back and look at that.
So like if like you were saying, if you were able to move them at that quickly on a third of an acre with that density, and you had good quality forage in that area, like you'd be really just like topping up their, like basically like right when they're about to like lay down and ruminate, you'd end up moving them again. And so you're just constantly keeping them full, which will put on a lot of weight, which is a good thing. They'll gain a lot of weight. But in that particular scenario, like there's not enough food in there. So like even if like we were pushing them, and after those 3 moves over like 30 minutes or whatever we were spending in each one, we let them out into, I don't know how many acres that paddock was.
Like 6 acres.
Yeah, like a 6 acre paddock of nice grass, legume, just general pasture mix out there, and they got to graze that for the rest of that day, and sort of like recover from being forced to like walk around in a circle for a couple hours in the morning. They were so annoyed. Put it lightly.
They know when
we're screwing with them.
It's not like we're screwing with them, but we're like making them work a little bit.
Yeah.
And they're not happy to do that. But it's a good tool to have. You need to. Yeah. If you can utilize things like that, not only are you gonna like if you had to just brush hog it, which we ended up brush hogging anyways, just because we didn't get them all knocked down. But if you didn't have a brush hog and you're able to do that, you just saved a lot of cost there, and you're positively impacting that negative situation.
The other thing also to consider with this whole stocking density, stocking rate thing is species. Like species play a big role in what you can run, right?
George said 780,000
pounds to the acre. Yeah.
It's about
a little over 750,000 pounds. The other thing to consider is like species when it comes to stocking rate and stocking density. So like sheep, for example, we touched on it earlier, but you can run a lot more sheep per acre than you can cows because they're a lot smaller. And so if you're in an area that has either a really low stocking rate because it's incredibly dry, right? Or you're somewhere where you don't have a ton of acreage, even though you've got like a decently high stocking rate because you have a good amount of moisture throughout the year. Like sheep are such a good option because you have so many more animals like in there, like relative to if you were running cattle.
So what he's saying, let's say you had 10 acres and your stocking rate for the county was for 3 acres per cow or per animal unit. With that, or let's make it more simple.
Let's make it easy. Yeah.
Let's say it was 5 acres per animal unit. 5 acres per animal unit is the stocking rate. So you could run on the 10 acres, you could run either 2 cows or you could run 10 sheep.
10 sheep or, because 10 ewes. And 10 it's like your 10 ewes are going to, I mean, you can do the math out, but like your 10 ewes most likely like are going to make you a lot more money, a lot faster than 2 cows. Than 2 cows. Yep. So it's like, it's like those things you also can consider, you know what I mean? And then you could sort of break it down even further about like cow size, right? Which is something that Greg harps on a lot, and it all comes back to this stocking rate, stocking density thing, where if you have two 1,500-pound cows, right, that's 3,000 pounds.
Or 3 animal
Or
units.
3 animal units, right? If you have 3 1,000-pound cows, that's 3,000 pounds or 3 animal units. But
It's
say
3 cows.
Yeah, it's 3 cows.
As opposed to 2 cows.
Say you're raising the 3 cows and I'm raising the 2 big monsters. Let's just pretend everything's equal and like my pasture is not going to get all pugged to crap and like it probably will. But like let's just keep everything else equal, right? Say they
same amount of forage.
Same amount of forage. They perform on the same amount of forage, which is also not true, but they perform on the same amount of forage, right?
They all give a calf.
They all give a calf, right? So I would get 2 calves every year because I've got 2 animals, for making up that 3,000 animal units. You have 3 animals making up that 3,000 animal units, so you get an extra calf every year. And so, like, just simple math like that, 3 calves is a lot more money than 2 calves.
And so you might say, well, no, these 2 calves will be bigger than the 3 calves when you wean them. And that's true. And if you know the cattle market, if you're relying on the cattle market, and you know the cattle market,
you're selling to the sale barn,
sale barn. The smaller the animal, the more per pound you get for the animal, because it's a longer time before, when they buy that animal, they have a longer time before they finish it, so they can put a lot more grain in it and then they can make a lot more profit.
It's really counterintuitive.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense.
I'll say it again, but it's like if you have a smaller calf and you bring them into the sale barn, you will make more money
per pound
than somebody who brings a larger calf into the sale barn of the same age.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like you were saying, the reason is that smaller calf, there's a longer time to finish it than that larger calf. And
so yes, maybe per calf you're making more for the bigger animal because you've got more pounds, and it's maybe, even though it's a little bit less money, you're still making more. Yeah. But you've got 3 calves as opposed to 2. So the weight there, and those 3 the 3 calves, their mamas are 1,000 pounds, so they're putting more. They don't take as much feed.
I mean, there's a lot of other positives, but like everything being equal, it's still advantageous to have like smaller framed animals. And then that's not counting the fact like feed efficiency and like destruction of pasture when it gets wet. Fertility. Every
100 pounds over 1,000 pound animal or cow, you lose, I think it's 2% fertility. So those 1,500 pound cows, they are
500 pounds over 1,000.
So
10%
reduction, less fertile than the 1,000 pound cows.
All things being equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now more food for thought. But anyway, I think that sort of covers the discussion about like stocking rate versus stocking density and sort of like things to think about. If people have got questions about it, throw it into the comments and we'll do our best to answer them.